Welcome back to the GFA 2020 virtual convention. Today, this afternoon, I'm so excited to share with you today is Guitar Society Track Day. This is our third in our final run of track days, which was new for us this year. So this afternoon's content will all be focused and centered around the work that our wonderful guitar societies do in their communities. So we're going to start actually with an interview with Johan Smith, last year's International Concert Artist Competition winner. And how is this related to guitar societies? Well, one of the most coveted prizes that comes with winning the GFA competition is a tour of 50 to 60 cities, mostly in the United States, North America, sometimes outside of our continent as well. But we have in the US such a really incredibly robust network of guitar societies that do such wonderful work in their communities. And our concert artist, our winner of our concert artist competition, is really incredibly fortunate to get to visit all these places. Now, we're living in 2020, and it's not so easy. So Johan, who won the competition last summer in different times, was really looking forward to meeting all of our friends around the country. So I wanted to share a little bit of his personality. We saw a little bit on Sunday. We're going to share a little bit more and talk just a little bit about the tour and what lies ahead. The fall portion of the tour is probably going to be pretty different. And what I want to say to all of you that are watching that enjoy Johan's personality, that enjoyed his performance on Sunday, as I know I did, things are different. And as you've seen, we've done a lot here online this week. And Johan is available for virtual concerts and virtual master classes. So I want to encourage all of you to reach out. We're going to drop it in the chat here. Reach out to our tour director, Teresa Hayward, and start a conversation about if having Johan into your organization, to your community, would be a great option for you to provide some real meaningful connection and content for your community this fall. Reach out to Teresa and she can have a conversation with you about seeing what might work to bring Johan in virtually this fall to your community. So we're going to start with a brief interview with Johan, a little short. Then we're going to, after that, jump into a lecture, kind of a roundtable conversation hosted by John Olson, who's on the GFA Board of Trustees. And he'll be inviting in leaders from some of the U.S. guitar societies that are really active. Not all of them. We can't have them all. There are too many. But we have some wonderful leaders from guitar societies joining us this afternoon, including Matt Hinsley, Adam Levin, Matt Rohde, Erik Mann, and Simon Powis, all to talk about the work that they do in their communities. Following that kind of short discussion, short presentation from each of them, there will be a lecture Q&A, question and answer, that will be happening in the Zoom room. Make sure you hop into it so you can hear the conversation that goes on there. Before we get into the content for this afternoon, I want to share one special treat that was presented to us just at the end of last week. That's an incredible example of the impact a guitar society can have on its community. We were incredibly fortunate to have great communication with Erik Mann and the Cleveland Classical Guitar Society. I think a lot of us know that they've been doing great work in their community for a long time. And they have recorded a very special video, which this will be the world premiere of that video. Of 4 of their students that they've been working with in terms of community outreach and education. These 4 students are going to be playing a piece written by Thomas Flippin from Duo Noir, who was one of our artists this week. Thomas wrote this piece in response to events that happened in Ferguson, Missouri, not that long ago. It's a powerful piece that represents his response in a musical form to the events of Ferguson. The piece is called Beyond Ferguson. It is available on Thomas's website for free. It's really about spreading a message. It's not about making money. So please visit. We're going to drop that link in the chat as well. Visit Thomas's website if you'd like to share this piece within your community, to talk open conversations, open dialogue in your community around race. So we'll have links in the chat for the piece, as well as a link to the YouTube where you can see the video offline outside of our stream eventually. So thank you very much to all of you for tuning in. Thank you to Thomas for this moving piece. Thank you to Erik Mann and the Cleveland Classical Guitar Society for sharing this world premiere video with us, Beyond Ferguson.
problem is a strange experience.
It dawned on me, with a certain suddenness, that I was different from the other.
Shut out from their world by a vast veil.
It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness.
This sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others.
Of measuring one's soul by a tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity.
One never feels his choose. An American, a Negro.
The history of an American Negro is the history of this strife.
He simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American, without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without having the doors of opportunity closed roughly in his face.
This, then, is the end of his striving.
Hi, my name is Chris Mallet, and I'm a classical guitarist based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am the co-director of the California Conservatory of Music and serve on the faculty of the University of California, Santa Cruz. I have been a GFA board member since 2019, and I couldn't be more thrilled to serve next to some of my favorite guitarists and educators. The first GFA convention I attended was in 2005 in Oberlin, Ohio, while I was a student at the Oberlin Conservatory of Music. It was my first experience attending a large guitar festival, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Since then, I've been to many of the GFA conventions, and I can honestly say that if it wasn't for the GFA, I wouldn't be the guitarist or teacher that I am today. There are too many highlights from previous conventions to list, but my favorite parts are definitely the concerts, lectures, and of course the competitions. We are so happy that we are able to bring the GFA convention online, especially in such uncertain times. This year, we were not only able to bring it online, but we were able to include everything that would have been at the convention in Indianapolis this year, but now to a much wider audience around the world, and all for free. We know how important the GFA is to everyone around the world, which is why it was crucial to continue without interruption this year, and we see it as a fantastic opportunity to build our community even more with guitarists near and far. We want to make sure to still offer world-class concerts, masterclasses, lectures, technique workshops, guitar orchestra performances, roundtable discussions, and the IYC and ICAC competitions. We hope that you will consider supporting the GFA by donating or becoming a member. Becoming a GFA member offers many benefits. First, you will receive the GFA's quarterly magazine called Soundboard, which will keep you up to date with what's happening in the guitar world, and features in-depth articles, sheet music, album reviews, and more. You will also receive discounts to places like GSI, Strings by Mail, GSP, and the list goes on and on. You can donate or become a member directly on the GFA website or donate through the PayPal giving link, which will appear after this video. Thank you all for joining us and supporting the GFA, and I hope that you're all staying safe. Thank you.
Welcome back, Johan Smith. Thank you again for being with us. You kicked off the convention with us on Sunday with the performance, and we got to know you a little bit, chatted about your GFA experience, both as a competitor and just kind of appreciating the event and what your past year's been like. But today we want to talk about the tour. And this is, I think, probably why most people come to compete at GFA is they want this tour experience. Would you say that that's true for you? I'm sorry to put words in your mouth, but is the tour a big part of why you wanted to win the GFA?
Actually, I never planned to win the GFA, so I never had so much expectation about that, you know.
Sorry to ruin it for you.
No. Don't worry. I went to GFA because I just thought that I have to be there for one time into my life. So yeah. No, I didn't expect anything except, playing concerts. That is something missing too much nowadays. So yeah. But of course, meeting people, that's so important. I love to teach too. So yeah, I really eager to start this tour and to share music, and yeah.
Tell me about your teaching right now. Where are you teaching? What kind of students?
Oh, I teach in Conservatory of Morges. It's near Geneva. I have like 30 students per class. That is a lot. So my life is a bit like practicing, teaching, sleeping, practicing, teaching, but it's okay. I love that. And so I teach at it's a wide range of students. It's like the very beginner of 10 years old that's starting the guitar, to the pre-professional player who wants to to go professional, and yeah, it's really wide range, and yeah, it's really something important for me to teach, because it gives sense into performing live. You know, it's when you are working so hard to think about music, to solve problem. The sense of that is to teach it, I think. And in that sense, I have a very funny thing to say. When I was very young, like 13 years old, a very young guitarist, my first teacher told me that one of his teacher, of his teacher, of his teacher, and so on, was Francisco Tarrega. And I was really, oh, wow, this is awesome, you know.
Yes.
So it's very far away. So it's, yeah. But at the end, it gives so much to, in a very humble way, of course, to bring, you know, just a little bit part of all this tradition to be able to make it continue. And yeah, it's, yeah. And of course, I love the relationship with the student. It's something I really like. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. So you are not just a fabulous player, a fabulous teacher as well. I love that.
Oh, I don't know if I'm fabulous, but I try to do my best, you know.
Well, a large part of being fabulous is caring, which that's obvious that you do. So I look forward to seeing that aspect of your career as well. So today, the reason we wanted to have you back today to talk a little bit is that today's Guitar Society's track day. So this afternoon, we're going to be having a lot of lectures that are really aimed at reaching out to the people that run guitar societies, which is a very US-based thing, but there are organizations throughout the world that do a lot of guitar-oriented work. But of course, the US Guitar Societies, North American, I should say, are really the hosts for your tour. And of course, the tour is not going to be exactly like we planned because of the situation we're all in together. So we had talked last week, yourself, myself, and Teresa, who is our tour director. She is absolutely fabulous and working hard to make the best of all the situations that arise. So Teresa, you and me met last week, and we really just came to the decision that it's looking not so possible to make anything work for this fall because there are too many presenters that just can't do it, of course, understandably. So we're not going to be starting your tour till the spring, and then we're kind of trying to wait and see how we can piece things together in the most logical way, so you're not coming over for one concert all the way from Switzerland, because that's a long way to come. So we're trying to see where it's safe and possible to get you to come in and share with us. So at any rate, at some point, you will be starting your tour. And so I'm fortunate to have lived through the tour myself, and I have a lot of great memories. Really mostly great ones. There's very little that was annoying about it. It was pretty mostly great, I will say. I'm curious what you're most looking forward to on the tour, if you have thoughts, expectations, dreams, things you've heard.
If I had dreams, it's it's already a dream to be able to do this tour. So I don't see something more of it, except playing in concert, meeting people, teaching, of course, the masterclass, and see the United States, because it's something. It's a place that I don't really know, except for Miami, of course. But, I don't know this place. I went to Canada a few times, but never to, only once to Miami. So.
Okay, so you just set me up for the next thing I want to do. So one of the things, as I'm doing this, I learned a lot. You know, I was born in the US, mostly raised here. I moved around a lot in the United States, lived in Germany for a little bit when I was growing up, but I mostly have been in the US. and I've traveled quite a bit with my family, but doing this tour is a whole nother thing. And giant shout out to all the presenters that take care of our artists every year. I think hopefully they love having the artists in. I think they do, or else they wouldn't keep inviting our artists back. But it's also this great opportunity for the person that's going around. And I learned so much about our country. I saw so many different kinds of squirrels that I kind of thought of one version of squirrel. There's so many kinds of squirrels, like just wait for the squirrels. Some birds I had never seen before, so kind of taking in nature. And then I learned like all these kind of random trivia facts about the United States, which like at the time I remember thinking, oh, that's crazy. And then, you know, some of that information you store, some of it you chalk. I'm going to ask you a few trivia questions. Now, let me just say, I have zero expectation that you're going to get them right. If you do, I should give you some kind of extra prize. I'm not sure what it's going to be.
Oh,
extra prize? Okay. So if you get, I'm going to do 4 questions, one of which I think you have a chance at knowing, but I don't know if you will. To be fair, I don't think you'll know the other 3. To be fair, I think 60% of American citizens may not know the other 3.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Okay, so there are how many states in the United States? There's a lot, right? It's hard. That's not even one of my questions. Don't even strain your brain. What's the smallest state?
Oh, no. It's very difficult. I don't know the answer really. I
it's not California.
I don't know if it's New York is a state.
Okay,
you know?
So I'm going to give you bonus points for being close, like in the right region, and it's a smaller state. So not quite. Yeah. So just FYI, it's Rhode Island.
Ah, okay.
Rhode Island. I mean, not the biggest state, not a giant population, but they do have some fantastic guitar activity in Rhode Island. So shout out to our friends in Rhode Island, smallest state in the United States.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Now you know. You're welcome. Yes.
I know.
Okay. I don't know if you know this one. This is the kind of thing that maybe you would have learned, but maybe you wouldn't have stored. It's almost also a trick question, I think. What's the longest river in the United States? It's quite long. It's more than 2,500 miles long.
I've heard a lot about the Mississippi and it is.
Yes, that's the trick.
This is the trick. Oh no.
It's not the Mississippi. Darn. But hey, you're doing well because you're very like adjacent to the answers. So not the Mississippi. Do you have any other guesses? I can't imagine you would.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm so impressed you got the Mississippi. So it's the Missouri River.
It's what?
The Missouri River.
Missouri. Okay, I didn't know that existed. So okay.
It does. It's the longest one in the United States. And when you come, you will pass through cities along the Missouri River.
Awesome.
Fabulous cities. You will see some of those along your tour. Okay, and the last bit of trivia. I really remember, the first 2 I learned in my school upbringing, but the last one is one of my favorite bits that I remember. I don't know why I took note of, I saw so many state capitol buildings, the actual building. And I just, everybody liked to show you the state capitol building, and they're also different, and some of them resemble the Capitol in the United States, in Washington, D.C., and some of them are distinct in their own ways. The largest state capitol building in the United States. Which state has the largest state capitol building?
You mean the
building where the Congress for the state meets?
Ah.
Which state? Take a guess. It's a big building for a big state. They like everything big in this state. Big hats, big hair.
Big hair.
Big hair. Lots of guitar in this state. Tons of guitar in this state. Shout out to our friends.
I'm really sorry.
No, it's okay. I didn't know till I did my tour either. So you're going to go and find out that Austin, Texas has the largest state capitol. Yep.
Yeah, it's okay. this is the biggest. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So you'll visit Austin at some point. You'll visit all kinds of places. So there's my little bit of U.S. trivia for you. I think you were kind of amazing, actually, in how close you got on your answers. So bravo.
I will learn more.
You're going to learn a ton, thanks to all our friends here who do a great job, not only of presenting the concerts, but of taking care of the GFA tour winner who comes through. So I know they're going to look forward to getting to know you. Now, I'm going to close with, well, first of all, if you ever come up with any Swiss trivia questions, hit me.
Maybe,
but,
yeah.
Oh, God.
It's a very small country, right? But
Okay.
What is the name of the largest lake in Switzerland?
Oh,
Lake in Switzerland.
okay. Interlaken?
No,
That's
no.
a lake.
Sorry. It's called the lake Léman, or maybe you are calling it the Geneva Lake. It's it starts from Geneva and it's the widest lake. Yeah.
Okay, so when you fly into oh my God, the big city what's the big city you fly into in Switzerland?
Zurich or
yeah, when you fly into Zurich and then you take the train out of there, what's the big lake that's right there? Is that Lake Geneva?
Geneva, yes, it's the biggest lake.
Oh,
but yeah.
Fabulous. Well, it's a gorgeous lake.
Yeah, very beautiful. Yeah. You have
In fact, I don't think we have any lakes that beautiful in the United States, but we have other things. Oh, I forgot to give you my softball question that maybe you have a chance at knowing. In which state is Death Valley?
Death Valley.
Death Valley.
Like the death.
Like death.
Like death. Okay. I didn't know that.
You haven't heard of it. It's a desert and it's called Death Valley because it's, consistently, you're going to have to learn Fahrenheit for us. I'm very sorry. We don't speak centigrade. It's consistently like 120 plus degrees in the summer. Extraordinarily hot. You go out there, you die.
You are dead. Okay.
In the state of California.
Okay. It's California. Okay. Oh.
Yep.
Oh.
So California has the oceans, and then you go inland a little bit, and you hit the deserts, and it's crazy hot. So
next year we are going to take a walk in the Death Valley, or
so when you come to Los Angeles, I'm going to make sure you get out to Death Valley then, because it's not so far from here. So. Okay, so to wrap, I'm going to give you one final question. Now, this question I got not when I was on my tour, but just a few years back. I was in Florida, actually in Miami, where you won the competition. And the Florida Guitar Foundation is one of our great societies, and they have they did a video interview with me, kind of like this, and they finished with a question which I thought was really cute and charming and made me think, and I'm not sure I gave a perfect answer, or nor do I even remember what my answer was, but I thought, it required me to reveal a little bit of something about myself. So thank you to Dan with the Florida Guitar Foundation for this question that I now put to you to help all of our tour presenters get to know you a little bit. So important, Johan. Think hard. What is your favorite dessert?
Oh, this is a very difficult question because I love so much food, Maybe tiramisu from Italy. It's one of the biggest thing, but good tiramisu, with the biggest cream and mascarpone and all this stuff. It's fabulous. It's like cloud, but in your mouth. Yeah.
Clouds in your mouth.
I don't know how to say that, but in French.
That's perfect.
The image is working pretty well. Yeah.
It is working very well. That's perfect. Okay, so on the tour, please expect lots of tiramisu from your hosts. And we look forward to, redefining what the tour can be, to invite you and have you get to know all these people that have been taking care of our winners for so long. So thank you you for beginning our convention this week and coming back to see us today so that all of our society friends could meet you as well. Thank you, Johan, for your time.
And hope to see you soon. Bye.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Guitar Society's track of the 2020 GFA convention. My name is John Olson. I'm the president of the New York City Classical Guitar Society. I've had the pleasure of leading several Guitar Society roundtables at previous GFA conventions, and while we plan to continue these roundtables in upcoming years, we're looking forward today in this online session to sharing 4 presentations that we hope will be of particular value to leaders of guitar societies or those interested in starting societies or becoming more involved in their leadership or expanding their programs. I'd like to start by thanking the GFA for including these Guitar Society sessions in the conventions and for recognizing the critical role that guitar societies play in the classical guitar community. I also want to thank our presenters who have prepared 4 excellent presentations for the session today. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to watch and participate and be part of this session. We have titled this session Guitar Societies, Passion, Connection, and Community. Those are themes that you will hear in the talks, but they are also what guitar societies are all about. Societies are incredibly varied, small and large, simple programs to extensive offerings. But they're united not just by the focus on the guitar, but by the 3 ideas in that title, passion, connection, and community. Most societies start by people who are passionate about the guitar. They are usually staffed by volunteers who share this passion, and they grow when there's passion to do more, to present concerts, to share our love of guitar more widely, to start education programs, to bring more music opportunities to students, or to initiate creative programs in workplaces or prisons or public spaces that serve the common good. Ultimately, all of this passion is about using our instrument to connect people. It usually starts with open mics or salons for members to share music with each other and get to know other guitarists. It often grows to include guitar orchestras that become important musical and social aspects of members' lives. And through concerts and other programs, it grows to connect larger groups of people who respond to music through our instrument and who experience greater connection with one another through it. And finally, all of this leads to community. And ultimately, it is all about serving the community we find ourselves in. Who that community is may be different for each society and for a given society at different stages. But whether it is the community of society members or the greater community of the town or city or region that we live in, it is ultimately about enhancing the life of the community through music. Our speakers today will talk about different important aspects of running, managing, and growing a guitar society, but the talks will all share these common threads of passion, connection, and community. We'll start with Matt Hinsley, who runs the remarkable Austin Classical Guitar Organization. He will talk about how a mission and vision with community service at the center translates into organizational focus, energizes the community, and leads to powerful results. After Matt, we will hear from Matt Rohde and Adam Levin, who will describe their experience with starting and making a difference with their nonprofit organization, the Guitar Project. It's not a guitar society in the usual sense, but the same elements are part of it, and I think we will all learn a lot from their experience. Next, we will hear from Erik Mann, who leads the Cleveland Classical Guitar Society. He will focus on grant writing and how to make the connection between your passionate ideas and the funders who can support them. And finally, we will close with a presentation by Simon Powis, who founded and runs Classical Guitar Corner, and who also serves on the board of directors of the New York City Classical Guitar Society. Simon will talk about new approaches to building audiences and community. We'll have a few minutes after each talk for questions. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you enjoy the session.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for this talk today about founding principles, mission, and vision for classical guitar societies or nonprofit organizations. My name is Matt Hinsley, and I'm Executive Director of Austin Classical Guitar. I had the great privilege of working with this organization when I was 20 years old. I became the board president in an organization that was all volunteer in 1996 when I arrived here in Austin, and have had the wonderful joy of spending the last 23 and a half years working with the organization, watching it grow, growing to a point where we have now 12 full-time staff members, an office that is outside of my apartment, and very broad programming, both locally and nationally and internationally. And so what I'll be talking about today is the core of it all, what I believe is at the center of how we have grown. We really started to grow in 2003, 2004, 2005. And so pretty quickly after that, lots of guitar organizations started asking me for advice. And if I had to boil down to one word, the secret to all of it, I would say that word is service. And that is why that is in the title of this talk. But now let's go ahead and get into it. When most people reach out to me with questions about building an organization, it revolves around some version of this main question. How can our communities better support our artists? It's really usually a fundraising question. This is on the minds of all artists. So if you're a classical guitarist listening to this, and I imagine many of you are, then this is a burning question, right? It's kind of a well-known adage that it's hard to make money in the arts. And so how do we put those two things together? How do we put art and money together? How do we get our community to support our art form? And at the heart of most of the questions that I get, it's some version of this. How do we get grants? How do we get more people to buy our tickets? How do we get more sponsors? Things like that. I love to turn this question precisely on its head and ask, how can our artists better support our communities? Whoa. Because in this question, we can start to see our power. We can start to see the potential that we as artists have to make a real difference in our communities, bringing people together, bringing educational opportunities to individuals, international cultural exchange or cultural exchange of any kind, helping people express themselves. These are all ways in which we as artists can help support our communities. And what I've found is that when we do that well, when we find our place in our communities as servants, that's when lots of things happen. Lots of energy is developed. People join our boards who are not guitarists or guitar professors or guitar teachers, but they're just people in the community that believe in the work that we're doing, because the work that we're doing resonates with the community in a broad sense. And along with that energy and along with people comes that other thing, money. So this has never been more important than right now in the time of the pandemic that we are all experiencing. And really the dual pandemics, to borrow a phrase from someone who I heard speak recently, of COVID-19 and also the pandemic that has been affecting our country since its inception, which is racism. And these are both in profound and also very different ways dividing our people, causing pain, and are in very much need of finding solutions to. But here we are in this pandemic situation, and how many things have we seen in music that are inspiring? if it's Italians singing to one another from their balconies, if it's the cast of Hamilton coming together doing a grid video. There's so many ways in which music has been inspiring to us. Yo-Yo Ma's Songs of Comfort. And so I thought I would start there as far as the COVID-19 situation goes, and to just share a few things that we as an organization have been up to. So normally we have an ensemble festival every year that involves a little over 100 guitarists, usually from our region, and that ensemble festival is called ACG Fest. And they always premiere as a big giant group a new piece of music, which is the winner of our composition competition. So the piece this year that won the competition by Brandon Carcamo from Louisiana was a piece called Solace, and we had planned to premiere it on April 25th. Of course, that event got canceled, and we ended up transitioning the project to an online project. And it became not only a way for people to play together, but we also ended up introducing additional modalities so that people could write poetry, they could submit photographs of things that bring them solace, they could submit short videos, and we put all of that together to form a topical and expressive, powerful piece of togetherness, and ended up premiering it on our season finale online on May 30th. So the first example of several that I'll show you today of ways in which perhaps we can expand our thinking about our role and our answer to that question of how can artists support our communities. We launched pretty quickly, actually, in March, April, several different new branded series. So one was ACG Watch Parties, and you can see at the time that I took this screenshot of our website, there were 6 different features that we had done. Those were like director's commentary style watch parties of existing video assets. Let's Listen was similar. It was like a hosted a listening experience, and we focused on artists we just had, like David Russell, or artists that we were going to have but couldn't, or some of our community service elements, and would share that information and kind of create an introduction and then bring people in so it still really felt personal. And below you see one of our watch parties featured. We had an online meditation, and something really not pictured here was a series of online concerts that we did. People loved those online concerts. In fact, so much so that year over year, believe it or not, our revenue increased in April and May as an organization, because when people had an opportunity to respond to our online events, they had an opportunity to donate, and the events became very popular. People really liked them. We got a lot of great feedback, and about 15% of people responding chose to donate, and those donations really added up over time. So I start with these 2 examples to just give you a sense that it's not all hopeless right now, right? Right now, in this time of social distancing, there's still real work that we can do, and even opportunities, if we're particular about it, to potentially continue to make money and connect with our community in meaningful ways. Here's another example from just a little while ago. On August 27th, 2017, I was sitting in my studio here getting ready to write marketing text for an event that we had coming up that would have been September 9th that year, just about 2 weeks later. But that day was the day that a big hurricane was here in Texas. It was called Hurricane Harvey, and it had spun through Beaumont and devastated Houston. And at the point that I was writing, actually it was in Beaumont, still spinning over Beaumont and dropping lots and lots of rain. And it just didn't feel right as a citizen of the state of Texas to write a business as usual marketing newsletter for an event we had coming up. And so instead, made a few phone calls to staff, we had a meeting, and we ended up working with some friends of ours in the music community in Austin to have a response to this a big community problem. And we decided that our goal would be money raised to put toward the problem directly, followed by goods donated, followed by volunteer list generated, and also comfort for people who had lost something or were concerned about their friends and their neighbors. And so 4 days later, we had this concert that you see featured in this picture. There were 550 people that had come out on 4 days' notice. We actually had to put up a second room with a spillover and a closed-circuit TV so that they could see what was happening out in the other room. $37,500 was donated to Sylvester Turner's Hurricane Disaster Relief Fund in Houston, and we turned around and wrote a check for $37,500, 100% of that money donated to that cause. Over 200 volunteers came in on a list, 2 carloads of donated goods came in. And right in this moment, we are all standing and singing Amazing Grace together. The performers are on stage. And I learned that day that it's hard to cry and sing at the same time. So once again, how can art serve our communities? I have so many stories, but here's just one kind of idea from the past of one of the many things that we have gotten up to that has generated goodwill and brought people in. So I have a little exercise for us to do now. And I'll just make some assumptions as we go through. So the first question for my art and service exercise is, what do you do? What is your art? And I'm going to assume that the answer is classical guitar. So the second question is, simply put, what can you do for people with it? And I'll make an assumption there too, that basically we can play or we can teach. Now there's a few others, like we can write a new piece of music or commission something, collaborate maybe, but for the most part, the playing and the teaching are the two big things that we can do with guitar. And so a lot of people stop there. A lot of people think, well, I have a repertoire of Giuliani and Brouwer and Villalobos and Soar, and so I want to play that repertoire. I want to teach people that repertoire, and so I need my community to support me by coming to my events, buying tickets, or what have you. But here's where it gets interesting. I like to ask people, who can you do it for? So I want a big list. I want 30, 40, 50 people on your list of who you can do it for, and not just people, but constituencies, parts of town, people in different kinds of schools, high need areas in your particular community, different age groups. Who can you do your art for? Who would you like to most serve? And once you have that list really filled out, then we ask the big question. How can you adapt number 2, that's the playing and the teaching, to best serve a group in number 3? Let's say that one of the groups you wanted to serve was young families, so parents with small children. Wow, well, there's a million ideas all of a sudden that you can do. You could make sure that you're doing concerts for free. You could do them at the library during times that there are other programs for young parents. You might adjust your program a little bit to make sure that it will be of interest for young kids. You may add interactive elements to it. You may work with a local storyteller and do musical story times with the guitar. The options are endless, but think about how profound this is. This really, it leverages your ability to play and teach the guitar and turns it into a community service mindset when you do this exercise. I'll tell 2 more quick stories just to keep your minds opening here. So in 2010, we had built 8 classical guitar education programs in 8 schools in Austin. They were fully enrolled, meaning we had 100+ students in each one, really getting a lot of attention. And we got introduced to the juvenile justice system. There's a center in Austin for incarcerated youth. They had no performing arts program on a daily basis there. and people thought that a guitar program there might be able to do some good. Well, I'm proud to say that since 2010, my team at Austin Classical Guitar, led by Travis Markham and Jeremy Osborne, has been teaching virtually every school day in the Juvenile Detention Center ever since. So we've made some deep relationships. We've seen some kids get really good at guitar and seen some really profound changes in kids and in ourselves over time. What you see pictured here is a full-scale, three-dimensional replica of a classical guitar made by a young person who was incarcerated at the Gardner Betts Juvenile Detention Center. He made this in secret, from our teacher, that is, as a gift for Jeremy Osborne, and you can actually see that Osborne is emblazoned across the front of the guitar. And if you can imagine the state of mind that this young person had before we met him, how we had to build a relationship, help him to build skills, all of the different kinds of effort and courage and struggle that went into the changes that happened over time, to 18 months into our relationship, when he chose to take the small amount of unstructured time that he had and apply it to building a gift like this for his teacher, then you get a window into the depth of service. This is also, of course, a window into the kinds of opportunities that probably exist in your community for classical guitar to make a big difference in people's lives. We also had an opportunity to build an education program at Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And as I said, we had a lot of experience building education programs in schools, so this came to us as a new opportunity, and pretty quickly we realized that there was no literacy-based music education program in Braille for students who were blind or visually impaired. And we had the wonderful opportunity to create one over time. I should say, in both of these cases, at TSBVI and also in the juvenile justice centers, we fund this. We pay for these programs. And we raise the money for them because these programs are so important. They're so captivating that people in our community want to support them. And that gets back to that original question: how can artists support our communities? How can artists support our diverse communities? Looking for those needs, meeting those needs with the skills and the talents that we have, and making a difference. That turns into many things, and one of those things is resources and money. I got one more quick exercise for you. Think about who's in your sphere of impact. Who do you play for? Who do you teach? Who do you impact? I love to think about what we do in music through two lenses: form and essence. Form is what we do. Well, we pick up the guitar, we play these songs, we have these concerts, so many X number of people are in the audience, that kind of thing. I like to think of essence as the hard to measure, impossible to see impact that is made on people when they experience our art. When their lives are changed, if it's one time in a concert, or if it's over many years in an education program, or if it's through a bunch of struggle doing something they never thought they could do that is transformative. So the question here is, what is an example of impact you have made recently with your art? And I want you to think about who said thanks, who smiled, who cried, who was impacted. What is that impact? Can you describe it in terms of essence? The next exercise then is, what could you do tomorrow to deepen that impact? Now, I don't mean get better at the guitar. I mean, think about if you said it made somebody see the world in a different way. Well, maybe you can think about what you say before you play, how you appear, how you smile, how you dress, what the event is styled as. As an organization, there's a million ways that we make impact on people that actually don't have much to do with what's on stage. Let's look at an example. So that's worth spending a little bit of time thinking about. We can talk about the form. We can talk about who was involved. We can talk about the kids. We can talk about the 1,200 people that were in the audience there to see David Russell, because that was our last live event before the pandemic took away events. We can talk about the teachers, us. So all the people involved. We can talk about what they did, what the level of curricular achievement was of the kids. And then there's all the essence. Going back to the beginning when the kids first heard about this opportunity and they knew they were going to play in front of a big audience and dance in front of a big audience, and the impact of them working together across disciplines. The kids from the guitar program working with kids from the dance program. We can talk about the impact on our donors as people see an example of kids in our community doing something beautiful together. There's a lot to unpack there. This is one of my axioms that I love to share when I'm teaching arts administration. And so far we've only talked about the top two, and that's where I'll stop today. But service and impact. Deep impact and service times trust plus communication. That is your marketing strategy and your communication. Trust meaning relationships that you build over time. I believe that it's those elements that equal art and money. So I'm just about done, and I wanted to run you quickly through the missions of Austin Classical Guitar since 2000, because it's fun and a little bit uncomfortable for me. But here's the mission from 2000. Austin Classical Guitar was formed to further the awareness of the history and literature of the classical guitar, as well as promote the learning, research, composition for the instrument, blah, blah, blah. That mission serves guitar. In 2006, the Austin Classical Guitar Society strives to be a leading promoter of classical guitar in the United States. That mission serves guitar. ACGS 2012 now. ACGS is a world leader in community service through music on the classical guitar. Now our mission statement had started to catch up with what we were actually doing, and we go on to explain some of the stuff that we were up to at that point. And finally, 2015, our current mission statement emerged. Our mission is to inspire each member of our community through musical experiences of deep personal significance, recognizing that it's about what happens between people's ears that matters. It's what happens in people's hearts, and recognizing that not everybody interacts with music in the same way. And so we try to recognize people's differences and invite them in to belong with us through service. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for joining me. I will look forward to your questions right now.
All right, I think we're live. Hello, everybody at Guitar Foundation of America. We're really pleased to be here among esteemed panelists, and we look forward to talking to you about arts infrastructure and how to make it sustainable, and going through some of the nuts and bolts behind creating organizations like our own. So my name is Adam Levin.
My name is Matthew Rohde.
And together we formed over 5 years ago Cathar Project. Cathar Project is a nonprofit 501c3 organization dedicated to improving the lives of children and youth through the classical guitar. This community-based guitar education program is multifaceted. We offer all of the group classes, individual classes, guest artist performances, field trips to the city to see Guitar Society performances, the students joining guitar festivals, and to see performances and workshops they never would have had the chance to engage in before. And this is all tuition free. So that's something that separates us from other organizations, and we're really excited about that. We serve over 130 students, and they are among our 4 programs, which are in Boston, Albuquerque, and Mexico City.
We've got a budget of the current fiscal year of about $115,000, which has been steadily increasing over the last 5 years of our existence, and that's a great victory for us. We have 5 not full-time, but 5 faculty members, 2 here in Mexico, 2 in Boston, and 1 in Albuquerque. And we have a board of directors of 5 as well. The board of directors is a very important part of our organization. Here are Adam and I, and that was our operations director, Madeline Knudsen, and our teacher in Mexico in the previous photo. Here is what looks like a photo of some of our kids in Boston, probably before or after a class, if I had to guess. Here I am looking kind of sheepish with a group of kids down in Mexico City. The community where we work here, I'm based in Mexico City, is called Yugelito. Here are some of the more advanced kids working with the other Mexico City-based instructor, Cesar Lara, in a room that has been lent to us for the past several years by the community, which we beautified with colorful paints. And then here is our Albuquerque-based instructor, Genevieve Leitner, with a group of kids in Albuquerque. It looks like they're getting ready for maybe finishing up a performance of some sort. Then here are two clowns, no idea who they are, with a group of kids in Detroit. One thing that Adam didn't mention is that Cathar Project in the past couple of years has been taken on in sort of a consultancy role to help a school in Detroit set up a guitar program of its own, and that program would presumably be something like a sister program to our current programs right now. So here we are working with some of the kids there, being really silly. This photo is of Yugalito. Again, Yugalito is the community where we operate in Mexico City. This is Yugalito 12 years ago when it was created. It's built on top of what used to be a landfill and was settled by approximately 600 families 12 years ago in a very informal way. It's not recognized by the government and is thus, semi-autonomous, semi-self-sustaining. It's sociologically, it's a very, very interesting place. Here is Yugalito today, and you can see the sorts of changes it's undergone in the past 12 years. It's a much more permanent fixture of the urban landscape now. Okay, here is another picture of what looks like a sunset behind one of the major landmarks of the area. It's a hill that's actually used as a mine. And you can see some more examples of the architecture in the community. And then here's a sort of a bird's eye view of a plot of land, and this is very exciting for both Adam and me. It was gifted to Cathar Project not all that long ago by the community leadership so that we might build a brick and mortar music school of our own. And here we are down on the street level, inspecting the site with a few folks and discussing our plans for it. Here's an architectural rendering. Another really exciting element of this whole story is that a super hotshot, hip architecture firm took on the project pro bono. So we're getting a very cool design. You can see it's 2 levels, which gives us more performance and teaching space, and it really just opens up onto the street like a big speaker. And it also, in opening up like that, really is designed to invite the entire community into this sanctuary of music, which we hope to establish. And here you can see it in a more sort of elaborate, photorealistic architectural rendering.
What a nifty design. I can't wait to break ground.
It's so cool.
What a hip design.
I'm so excited.
All right. So Matt, let's talk a little bit more about Cathar Project. So how the heck did we come up with Cathar Project? What inspired it?
Well, personally, 5 years ago, I was hustling as a classical guitarist and looking for a way of broadening my own sort of professional footprint and having a more durable professional existence. I was basically one that went beyond concerts and teaching and gigs. I was also really inspired and taken by a number of other arts organizations that either friends were involved in or that I was just aware of otherwise. Dakota Ensemble is one that many of you may have heard of. The Boston Children's Chorus does amazing work in Boston. Austin Classical Guitar, the director and founder of which is on this panel too, Matt Hinsley. I think, as we all know, they do just amazing work. And Community Music Works in Rhode Island is another just excellent example of a great nonprofits organization. And so I was sort of looking at all those and thinking, I want to do something like that. Adam and I also, I think we both agree that there's a really deep crisis in arts and music education in this country. And I think regardless of one's professional aspirations, one's professional station, it's so important at any moment as a musician to look around your community, the country, the world, and just ask what's needed. If we ask that question, I think we're always going to land in the right place. It will never lead us astray, that question. And on top of that, I think I was also looking for a way of puncturing the solitude that comes with being a solo classical guitarist. I think so many people probably listening today can identify with that feeling, and what better way to do that than to embark on a joint venture with friends and colleagues. And finally, so much of the teaching work that I've done in the past and enjoyed most has been that in areas that otherwise just wouldn't have access to the guitar or to music education otherwise. I also love working internationally. So I think for me, speaking personally, creating Cathar Project was my attempt at bringing these different threads together. I don't know, Adam, if you have a similar, different experience or anything you might add to that.
Yeah, I've had a lot of similar experiences to you, and if I might add just two things. One, I think this has formalized a lot of the work that I've done over the course of my career in the community, and it's really allowed me to dedicate myself in a long-term kind of way to being part of the fabric of the community through music and ensuring that the next generation have the same opportunities that I did. And then also, I think it's really exciting to create an ecosystem where a breeding ground for music making and also an economy for young guitarists, classical guitarists, to begin to make a living and to share their ideas in a think tank. So yeah.
Yeah. So Adam, I'm hoping, I guess, that there are one or two people in this audience that might be interested in creating a nonprofit of their own, or at least taking their work in this direction. And for those people, real quickly, for their benefit, what did we have to do in order to make Cathar Project a reality? What were the nuts and bolts at the beginning that got us off the ground?
Yeah, it's not a glamorous or easy task to create a nonprofit. It takes years of patience and perseverance and really fostering growth over a long period of time in order to see results. I think at first, I think we put on our cavemen suits and typed into Google how to create a nonprofit organization. So, I think the two of us had done that 1 or 2 or 16 million times. And then we also engaged our friends, our colleagues, other executives in the nonprofit world, people at the conservatories and universities that we attended. And we asked them, what do you advise us? And some of the nuts and bolts include creating a mission statement. That is number one. You need to know what you are going to do, and succinctly. And then after you do that, then you need to assemble a board of people who can be your advocates and cheerleaders and promoters and people who have your back and the organization's best interest at hand. And then putting together, and this is painstaking, a budget. I think Matt and I at one point had an initial budget in the millions and realized that we were going to have to cut the private jets and the
next year.
Oh, next year, yeah.
Next fiscal year.
So we had to get realistic. We had to cut the fat, so to speak, and really become a lean, aerodynamic organization. And then outlining our programming. What are we going to deliver to our constituency? What are we going to deliver to our student body? And how are we going to monitor it and make sure that we get the outcome that we intend on getting? and spreading the word, marketing, whether it's social media, whether it's consistent newsletters to your constituency, expanding your network. I mean, I think nowadays with social globalization and social media, networking is so important, and it's one way that we can share the message, not only with our fans and patrons, but share the message with the families who we serve and the communities that they live in. And the most not glamorous part of all of it is asking for money, fundraising, blah. But unfortunately, it is something that drives our programming. We can't run our programs without dollars and cents. So we've learned to refine and articulate our mission in a way that that fans and patrons get excited about. So that's, and then also deciding where we're going to have the programming. Where are these target populations? We've decided on 4 target populations now, but who knows where we'll be in the future. So that's really where what is necessary to begin a nonprofit organization in a nutshell. So Matt, I've got I got another question for you, and it has to do with the community and impacting the community, transforming the community. How do you see, or how have you seen Cathara impact and transform the community across the board?
I mean, that's a great question. I work in Mexico, I have for the past 4 years, and so my most immediate experience with Cathara Project's work has been through this program. And Yucalito, as you may have been able to see in some of the photos, is in a pretty famously neglected part of the city. And one service that Cathara Project tangibly offers is that it offers a barrier between these kids and so many of the dangers and perhaps temptations of the street. So that's number one. We are building cross-generational ties. There's a grandfather who shows up to class every week with his grandson. And that kind of thing can only sort of strengthen the fabric of the community. And also, it's a relatively small community, and everyone, even people who aren't involved, don't have brothers or children involved, everyone knows about the program and everyone takes pride in it. It's become a really central part of the identity of Yucalito. And I mean, I think that's evidenced by the fact that they gave us a piece of land in the prime real estate in the middle of the community. And, you know, kids have played on the radio station before, on the local Mexico City radio. And when that happens, everybody listens, and it's a really big deal. So yes, I've observed a very strong linkage there. And on top of that, I think we all as musicians understand sort of intuitively and anecdotally that music education, regardless of where it's taking place, just makes more sensible and sensitive and empathic and disciplined and kind kids. And that's another observation that I've been able to make in spades of our own students over the past several years. Adam, maybe you have an anecdote of your own or something you might want to add?
Sure, I've just got 2 I want to share. One is I've observed and helped execute bringing together these students from different programs together across the virtual highways and bring them together online. You know, just like we're doing what seems normal every week. We've brought together the Albuquerque program with the Mexico program, the Detroit program, which we've consulted for, together with the Albuquerque program and the Mexico program. So we're really creating a platform for cultural exchange. We're getting kids outside of their neighborhood box and talking to people who are doing the same thing, but hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. So that's really cool. And I think especially in the Boston program, and I'm sure this is happening in other programs, we are seeing positive behavioral changes and transformations in our students. I can recall one student who was just going crazy, madhouse crazy, and just could not get his behavior under control. And when he first started the class, it was disrupting it. And it was like a switch went off after a few months of having been in the class, and he became more centered and dedicated, and he became the champion of the class. He really became one of the best students in our class, and I think that's happening. I think other people have noticed that that transformation in his behavior and are following suit. So I think it can really have many effects. So it's really beautiful. So where are we right now? I think we've got just a couple more minutes. What piece of advice do you have, Matt, for people considering advocacy work in music, nonprofits, art infrastructure? What's a piece of advice you have for them?
Gosh, take a lot of time to really get your mission right and to really articulate it in a clear and ideally simple way. Once you have that, once you've done that, the mission has to always be given priority in the work you do. Having a nonprofit, running a nonprofit can never be about creating more just financial opportunity for yourself. It can't be about professional advancement. The moment it is about those things, forget about it. It just doesn't work. Donors are not interested, and the work isn't the same either. So if you always are careful to let the mission drive your work, you're gonna end up in a good spot. You're gonna do good work. Beyond that, listen, I'm a musician, I'm an artist. We all are. I in the past have kind of run away from admin type work, and the sort of naked reality of nonprofit work is that so much of it is admin related, so much of it is development related, and for this kind of thing to work, you just have to embrace that. It's trench work. You got to learn how to write a budget. You got to learn how to at least work with an accountant, to do taxes for the organization, all that stuff, to ask for money, which is so uncomfortable for me, but you just got to do it. And when you get good at it, you're able to do so, to do so in a way that gets your donors excited to be involved, and it gets easier. So really embrace and make peace with that part of the process, because that's a large sort of shark's bite of the work you'll end up doing. Adam, you have anything to add?
I would say try to articulate, just second what you said, really, try to articulate very clearly what you want to do, the people you want, whose lives you want to affect, and identify how you're going to do it on paper. I think we are very good at articulating as performers and educators how to play the guitar, how to teach the guitar. And I think if we can translate that to an organizational arts infrastructure level, it'll be very advantageous to you. And also, I would advise you to reach out to your colleagues, your friends, your mentors, your guides, and ask them what their feelings are, what inspires them, and if they have any experience. I mean, at the end, we get into this business, this nonprofit business, because we're a collective, and we want to do this together. So I would start the conversation with somebody close and see where you go from there.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I think we're at the end of the road, but Adam and I are both extremely accessible. And if any of you guys have any ideas you'd like to bounce off or questions, you'd like to follow up with on anything we touched upon in this little talk, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much to the Guitar Foundation of America for this opportunity and for all of your great work. And again, thank you to all of you for sticking with us.
If you guys want to find out more about the organization, please visit catharproject.org or write either one of us at info@catharproject.org. Thank you very much, Guitar Foundation America, all of you out there watching, and we'll see you around the corner. Take care, stay safe, and stay healthy.
Hi to everybody at the GFA. I hope you're having a great time. I'm sorry we can't be together in person, but I'm glad that we can be together in some way. This is a very special opportunity to learn from all of each other. I'm Erik Mann. I'm the Executive Director of Cleveland Classical Guitar Society, and I'm doing a presentation on fundraising with a special focus on grant writing. A little bit about me. I went to a liberal arts college for guitar and then to conservatory for my master's degree, and then I taught kids and college level students at several colleges and performed. I was then asked if I wanted to lead the Cleveland Classical Guitar Society in 2009 as a volunteer. It was an all-volunteer organization, and I was surprised at how passionate I became about this. Really what a creative experience it was in its own right. At the time, there wasn't even a written budget, but over the last 11 years, I can actually say that our income and expenses have grown by a multiple of over 1,000 times, which is a really strange thing to say, but actually true. I came in with absolutely no experience of any sort in leadership or management. I had no idea how nonprofits worked, even though I had taught for nonprofits. And that experience is really common in the arts nonprofit world in general, and certainly in the guitar community. Many arts nonprofits are started up or built up by people with a lot of passion, but little or no training. And really, passion goes a long way, and it's the most important component. So if this is all new to you, then no problem. And if you already know some of this stuff, then I think you'll learn some new stuff too. Okay, so now we're going to get into the what and the why. There are at least 3 types of fundraising. There are grants, donor cultivation, and corporate funding. I'm going to entirely skip over corporate funding, although it can sound very appealing. Corporate funding is can work really well if you have thousands of people coming into your building and seeing this logo of a corporation. For most of us, that's not the case. And in any nonprofit, corporate funding tends to be the smallest or a smaller piece of the pie. For us smaller nonprofits, without a building of our own, it's pretty much a no-go until you get much larger. So for us at Cleveland Classical Guitar Society, grants are by far our largest source of income. Donors are second. So I'm going to talk mostly about grants, and I may talk about donors a little bit as well. There are at least 3 important facets to raising money through grants. So there's 3 that I really think of as sort of the bedrock here. So those 3 are meeting a community need, your passion, and relationships. So community need has to do with what you're doing that goes really above and beyond and goes into something very deep. Here at Cleveland Classical Guitar Society, we have a concert series which now features the best performers from around the world, and we do a lot of other things around those. and then an education program that we began in 2012 that serves exclusively kids from the city of Cleveland, which has the highest child poverty rate in the US. Most of these kids would never have a chance to learn an instrument without our program. And these are incredible people who are passionate and have gone on to just make beautiful music and do wonderful things. That's a program that is very difficult to start, but we've really worked very, very hard to make it the highest quality program we possibly can. We didn't start the program to raise money, of course. That's not at all the purpose of it. The purpose of the program is to really make a difference. And eventually, after many years of doing this, funders looked at this and decided that it's something that they were interested in scaling and supporting longer term. And I know that Matt Hinsley from Austin Classical Guitar is doing a whole lecture just on this topic, and no better person to talk about meeting community needs, for sure. So second, there's passion. Passion is so important. I think we often forget. We often think that funding agencies are just, sort of machines that, read through stuff and churn things out. And not at all. Your passion has to come through. And it should come through when you meet with program officers from foundations. And that is a very important thing to do. Your passion should come through. And it's always great if you have, for example, a board member come along who can also speak to their passion as a volunteer and show that there are even more people behind that. So third is relationships. Relationships, I would say you'll see that less in government grants, for example, especially as you get to the national level. But boy, is it important, especially with community foundations. So remember, when a community foundation is making funding choices, they are probably going to go with, if they're supporting the arts, they'll probably go with the orchestra, the big symphony orchestra, the big theater, the big art museum, because those are known qualities. They know, they've got big marketing programs, so everybody knows who they are. They have a big development staff that's working on building relationships with foundations. So we have to, with smaller organizations, we have to work a little harder. But that's really exactly where it starts. And don't get discouraged if you meet with a funder and they don't seem interested in funding you. They probably don't really know who you are or whether they can trust you yet. So think of it as a long-term relationship. Start those conversations. Ask them what they fund. Talk to them about what would make your organization eligible for funding at some point. And just build those over time. So I've got one story to share. In a meeting with one foundation that was already providing us funding, they recommended us to, this program officer recommended us to talk with a specific program officer at another foundation. And that led to an important 2-year grant for us at the other foundation, and eventually to the largest grant we've had in our history. And so that came through a relationship from one funder to another funder. And funders talk to each other. So if you're really doing a great job and you're trustworthy, spending the money as you're supposed to be doing it, you'll get some great talk going between foundations inevitably. And sometimes you can even, if you build a relationship with one program officer and they really love you, you can even ask them if they'll make an introduction to another foundation that might be interested in funding you. Types of grants. there are at least three types of organizations that you might get grants from. There are community foundations, there are private foundations, and there are government granting agencies. So I'll start with government. As with, and basically the same idea with community and private foundations. You want to start local. It's a smaller amount of people applying, so your chances are better. So you may have a city government grant, you may have a county government grant, you may have a state government grant, and you definitely have a national government grant, at least one, National Endowment of the Arts. Here in Cleveland, we don't really have a city government grant that I know of that's a good fit, but we've got a great county agency and a state agency. The state agency, when we first applied, government grants are a lot of work, and the one that we applied for at first, as we grew, it just seemed like it wasn't enough money for the amount of work that it was. But interestingly, as we grew, we eventually got bumped into a new category. And now from our state funder, Ohio Arts Council, we generally get 2 grants a year, every year, for 2 different programs, and they're pretty substantial amounts of money. So it's not, so it was a case where we thought maybe we should give up on this and not keep spending the time, and we sort of broke through. On the national level, it gets even harder. So National Endowment of the Arts is very competitive, and I know that Austin and St. Louis get National Endowment of the Arts grants. We applied twice a few years ago. We were rejected both times. It's a huge amount of work, and we'll apply again in the future, and we'll get it. But it's not actually first in our priority, because our time is better spent, local when possible. Private foundations are basically any person with a bunch of money can start a private foundation, and then they can give that money to wherever they want. So it's often about, if you happen to know the person, great. You can try and meet them. Otherwise, you probably don't have a great chance. But then there are community foundations. Here in Cleveland, we've got a number of them. And these are, really important partners to have. And when you're approaching a community foundation, you can really build a relationship that it's a little harder to do with a government organization, and it's really important to do. So I mentioned relationships before, I know. Your first step in approaching a community foundation should be to research them. Then your second step should be to set up a meeting to talk with a program officer. If it's not clear on who you should talk to, you might be able to kind of figure out online, or you can just give them a call. And you should have a meeting about whether, about what your ideas are, about whether you might be a good fit. And I'll say it over and over again, that first meeting should, is not going to indicate your future forever. You got to think long term. So if at the first meeting they seem a little reluctant to fund you, that's okay. They're just getting to know you, and it's going to take some time. Okay, so next, the things that you will be writing when you submit a grant application. So the very first thing is a letter of intent. Not all grants will have this, but if they do, and many do, basically it's a kind of a short form of a grant application saying, here's our idea, what do you think, can we apply? And the foundation will come back and say either yes or no. Again, not all of them have it, and it is a shorter form of the application. Then the next step is the application itself. Some grants you just start with the application itself. In every case, you should really have a conversation with someone at the foundation beforehand, so it should definitely not be a surprise. In the application, there's the narrative, which is basically the bulk of what where you talk about what your project is, what your idea is, what you want funded. Then there's the project budget. And then you'll have various attachments, which typically include an organizational budget. It might include it often includes a board list, and there might be some optional attachments. This is where, with those optional attachments, you really want to sell yourself. Could be annual report, season brochure, videos of future performers or past performers, curriculum items such as a teacher manual, outreach worksheets that your performers do. We do those in both English and Spanish because we have a large Spanish-speaking population here. All kinds of stuff you can add to your attachments. Then there's follow-up reports, final reports. Those are after the entire project is completed, after the end date. You generally have a month or 2 months or so to complete the final report. And that's where, you talk about how you did versus the goals that you set, essentially, and the great things that you did. Sometimes there will be an interim report, which is about halfway through the grant cycle. Usually it's a yearly grant cycle. And the interim report is usually pretty short. And it basically says, are you still doing what you initially planned on doing? Is there some kind of alteration that needs to be made to the trajectory of your program, which does happen, and because nobody has a crystal ball. And in that case, a program officer may want to talk to you about it and, just see how things are going. And then don't forget this. The last thing is the follow-ups. When you get a grant, thank you emails, thank you cards. These are important. Program officers don't get a lot of love. They are in tough jobs where they have to make tough decisions, or tough decisions are made by their board, and there's often unhappy people talking to them and nervous people asking for money. So important to say thank you. And also very, very important, email this foundation about news. So after you got the grant, if you have a student that's on CBS or NBC or something great that happened with your organization, email them, let them know. New thing, develop new materials, just send them an email once in a while to send them updates. That program officer typically has a boss that they report to, and they all report to the board of the foundation. And so that program officer's job is on the line, saying that, this organization did great things. Not to make that sound so dire, but overall, it is. And also the foundation will want to be cheerleaders for you. So if you have great stuff, they want to be talking about the great stuff that they're doing. And the great stuff that they're doing is funding great projects like yours, great organizations like yours. So remember, with a foundation, it's a partnership. They may seem like a cash machine, but they're actually a partner. They want to do great things in the community. They can't do it without you. You can't do it without them. It's a partnership. That's really important. So make sure you do your follow-ups. Okay, so the next question is, how much money do you ask for in a grant? This can be a tough question in some cases. So with government grants, there's usually a certain limit you can ask for within a grant. So it might be $5,000 or $10,000, and you have to match that one-on-one. So they want to see that they're not the only funder. They want to see that this project could run somewhat without them. So they want to see that one-to-one match. So if there's say a $10,000 limit, and you definitely have $10,000 of other income coming in somewhere, and you definitely have $20,000 in expenses, then you can ask for the full amount. If not, you have to ask for something less, of course. In some cases with government grants, there are some weird formulas. We have one that we apply for where we've gotten, the category may be up to $25,000, but depending on the size of the organization and this complicated formula, we can ask for $11,046 or some really odd number. Now, obviously, with foundation grants, it's a lot more subtle. So foundations don't usually have a rule about, in this grant category, this is the amount you can apply for. So that again comes down to a conversation. It's really best to do your research first. Foundations have 990s, and if you sign into candid.org, you have to create an account. It's pretty easy to do. You can see 990s of the foundations, and often on the 990s they'll say how much they funded other organizations. So you can kind of get a ballpark idea. And then it's always really, really important to have that conversation with the funder. Sometimes they'll suggest an amount, or if they don't, sometimes you can say, well, I was kind of thinking of this. Is this kind of in the ballpark of where we are in relation to our organizational budget and the impact that this project has in this project budget? So the bigger as your organization grows in size, with a lot of foundations, you can ask for more money later as you grow bigger. It's not the case with all foundations. We definitely have some where they give the same amount, even every year after year, no matter how big we grow, which is great too, for that support. But always have that conversation. That's a important way of helping to determine, how much to ask for. Finally, individual donors. I know I've left very little time at the end for individual donors, but the philosophy is the same as it is with foundations. It's about building a relationship. It's about getting to know each other. It's about the donor getting to trust you. That's very, very important. So there are many people out there who would love to support your cause. There are people who love to give their money locally. There are people who like to give money to smaller organizations rather than the big faceless organizations, and they would love to get to know someone one-on-one. There are many books written out about these. I've read a few. They leave me very cold, as far as being kind of sales pitches or almost manipulative, which I don't believe in any of that. I think it's about just getting to know the person, getting to know their passion, talking very honestly about what your organization does and where their money would go towards. And that relationship develops over time. There is a misconception that, or a kind of dream out there that I think a lot of people in the nonprofit world have, that somebody's going to just send in a check for $100,000 and all their problems will be solved, and this person will just continue to donate over time. It doesn't happen. That person may may send in a check for $500. That relationship has to be built, and over time, eventually that person may give a larger amount. It's very much like with foundations, though. Your partners, they want their money going to something great. You can't do it without them, so the two of you have to work in a partnership. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the talk. I'm really excited to get to take questions and get to talk to people. You can also reach out to me by email anytime at erik@cleguitar.org. So that's Erik with a K at cleguitar.org. And looking forward to talking with everybody. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Simon Powis. Thank you very much for having me here. Thanks to John Olson for inviting me, and thanks to the GFA for hosting this whole event. It's a real pleasure to be speaking. I'm not 100% clear about what might be posted as ways of introduction, so I'm going to start by just introducing myself and giving you a little bit of background to tell you where I'm coming from. I was born in Australia, and I did my early studies there with Raphael Agostino through the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. I then went on to study at the Royal Academy of Music. During those times, I was also part of the Sydney Classical Guitar Society board and very much involved with the Guitar Society there in Sydney. While I was in London, I was also in contact with guitar societies, the Ealing Guitar Society and others as well. I went on to do my doctorate, my master's and doctorate at Yale University, during which time I was very much in contact with the New York Classical Guitar Society. I had made visits to Milford, Connecticut Guitar Society, the New England Guitar Society, and also Boston and Connecticut Guitar Societies. I then went on, after I graduated, to run a number of online schools. I run 5 online schools and 1 software company, and you also do publishing of books. For the main school that you're probably aware of, or maybe aware of, is Classical Guitar Corner. This is one that's most fitting for this conversation. And Classical Guitar Corner is a community of guitarists from all over the world. We have an academy. It's an online learning program that's very robust in terms of the involvement of the community and relationship building, both between the people running the school, the CGC team as we call ourselves, and also between the members themselves. The cherry on the cake each year is actually our summer school, which unfortunately would be finishing right now when I'm filming Saturday the 20th of June, but fingers crossed moving forward. I am currently on the board of the New York Classical Guitar Society, and this is where this topic came about. I was presenting this as an idea to the board, and John suggested it might be a good topic to talk about here at the GFA. So that gives a little bit of background about where I'm coming from. From my 10 plus years with experience with online communities and also experiences with guitar societies in general, I think I do have some insight to offer in terms of audience building and community growth. And so hopefully some of the ideas that I present here will be of interest, and also maybe spark some ideas as how it applies to your own situation. I will say that this topic, I think I could do an entire semester course on this topic. It's very detailed and involved, but I'm going to give a pretty quick overview of some of the topics that will hopefully be useful to other guitar societies around the world. So I'm going to start with well, first of all, the title is an interesting place to start because John proposed this title, which is New Approaches to Building Audience and Community. And I liked that because it allows me to say that there's nothing new about what actually happens. And I guess my core point, if there's any takeaway, and I have the feeling that this might be repeated information after some of the other speakers, but really all it's about is relationships and building relationships. And so we do now have new tools with which to start those relationships, build those relationships, and grow those relationships. And that's sort of the lens that I'll be looking at. But relationships, as they always were and always will be, is really what it's all about. And we just now have different ways of interacting. And this time is very pertinent for the discussion because we've all been forced online, whether we like it or not. So let's start with this concept of an audience. When people talk about an audience, people have different ways of defining their audience. That might include social media followers. It might include how large their email list is. It might be how many students they have. People are relatively loose with that idea, but really it's a group of people who know, like, and trust you, that you have the attention of, that you have the privilege of communicating with. And so the first, I think, question that people often think of, or the first aspect they think of with audiences, is how big does an audience need to be? Or, what number will eventually get us to our goals? And really, when we're talking about classical guitar societies and their goals, which might be, audience attendance, involvement in meetings or guitar orchestras, really the numbers we're talking about are very, very small. I think some of the numbers we get attuned to on the online experience, they go into the millions. You get these videos with millions of views and thousands and hundreds of thousands of likes and this, what have you. But really that means very little, because it's the quality of the alignment of that audience, their intent, and their relationship with you. And obviously you cannot have a good relationship with millions of people. You can do certain things at scale, but the bigger it is, the more superficial that connection is, really. So, when we think of the size of an audience, I like to think of as very well-used internet number of 1,000 true fans. And this is a concept that came from Kevin Kelly, who is the editor of Wired magazine. And it's this concept in terms of, let's say, an individual. It applies really nicely to an individual if they want to support an artistic career, that if we define a true fan as basically someone like one of your parents, who would buy everything you put out, attend every performance they could, and travel hundreds of miles to support you if it's possible. That kind of person. If you have 1,000 of those, you really can quite easily support an individual career. And in the context of what we're talking about, audiences for classical guitar, I think 1,000 is also a good number to deal with. So it's delineating it from an acquaintance to someone that really, we'll talk about this process, but basically is an advocate of what you do. So the thing I love about that, and the thing that so many other people love about that number, is it's achievable. 1,000 is not an unfathomable number. It's also something you could map out a path at getting towards that destination. So it's within reach, one of those SMART goals. So the next thing we need to think about in terms of audience is who is your audience and who is not your audience. One of the things that I think is a sticking point for a lot of people is they try and please everybody. They try and create something that will appease the masses and find no dissenters, right? And so my understanding or my opinion is that if you try and please everyone, you will end up pleasing no one. So when you start thinking about who am I serving, who is the audience that I have the attention of or would like to have the attention of, you also need to be clear that in refining that idea, you're probably going to exclude some people too. And one of my favorite lines from a gentleman named Derek Sivers, he created CD Baby, of which many of us would be familiar because we published independent CDs on through that company. He has a great book called Whatever You Want, very small book, little tome of advice, but I like it very much. And one of the lines he says is that you should proudly exclude people. And this isn't about saying you are not welcome. It's not about that at all. It's actually about clarifying who you are serving and who your audience is. So for instance, with Classical Guitar Corner, we have a really robust curriculum of study that could take any number of people from their beginning stages all the way through to quite advanced stages. But if someone came and said, I have a 5-year-old daughter and she loves classical guitar, would this program suit her? I would say no, it's not really designed for child education. It's designed for adults, and the community is of amateur adult guitarists. What defines an amateur is a whole other conversation that I won't get into here, but I'm passionately an advocate of the amateur community because I think there's a lot. I'm not going to get into it. That's a whole other conversation. But and similarly, as we're defining sort of amateur and professional or aspiring professional, is this for university students or high school students that aspire to university degrees? Absolutely. I mean, the information is the same, the pathway is the same, but do we define them as our audience? No. And that's why we don't really have those people in our community, because we've decided that our audience really is the adult amateur classical guitarist. And with that definition of your audience being clear, it means that when you encounter someone that's a good fit for your audience, there will be a resonance of going, yes, I've found what I'm looking for. That sounds like me. If you say, this is for everyone, it's the best thing ever, and all are invited, come on in, it's better than anything else. I mean, first of all, your little red flag would go off and say, I don't know. And then secondly, there's no definition there. There's no clear audience that says, yes, that's for me. I'm that fit. And so although it's tempting to appeal to the biggest possible audience and not exclude anyone, I think it is really beneficial to be very clear about who your target audience is. So there are processes that I would suggest you might workshop with your own guitar society that define your audience, define how to serve them, what their needs are, and even creating something called an avatar. It's a very common online term, is this avatar, basically narrowing it down as far as you can go, sometimes even as far as what they had for breakfast, and figuring out who is this person. And that will really help you clarify your message, your style of communication, and everything that flows on that we're going to be talking about. So that's something that the core points I'd like to share about an audience. Positioning and marketing. Now, marketing can sometimes, I think, have a little bit of a bad rap because I think we are so attuned these days to abusive advertising, manipulative marketing that plays on fear and scarcity and all these things that are not nice. And I don't appreciate them. I, have to, as a leader of a community, walk the fine line of being ethical in your use and understanding of these techniques. But I think marketing can be a very powerful, very positive force. And I like to think of marketing, and this comes very much from a perspective from a gentleman named Seth Godin, who I highly recommend. I really like his form of communication and what he has to say. Marketing really is about communicating what you do and finding your right audience, finding that right cultural fit. And if you approach the idea of marketing from one of service, as in, let's say person X, she is there in her location and her life would be improved should she be aware that down the road there's a classical guitar society that serves someone like her really well and would enhance her quality of life. Then the responsibility is on the marketer, all of us, to connect with that person and build that relationship and let her know that there's somewhere for her to really fit in and be a part of. That's how I approach it. I'm looking for the right fit where we will enhance their lives, bring joy into their lives. And we have been very successful at that. I'm very proud of the way we've conducted ourselves with communicating and relationship development. So I think with that view, we are all marketers all the time, even on a personal level, just communicating to others who we are, what we stand for, how we operate. That's marketing. And so if we expand that out to businesses and institutions and societies, that's all it really is. It's just making it very clear who we are so that we can resonate with people that make a good fit. Positioning is a little bit redundant now of what I've talked about. Positioning is going to be, it can be a style of communication of, alignment, for instance, we're like the New York Phil just in Ann Arbor, right? Just like sort of aligning something that's a simple concept or something that people already know and then attaching it to you so that it's a kind of a quick elevator pitch so someone can tick a box and go, oh, I understand what you are right now. But also a bit more of a nuanced approach to positioning is that idea that being ultra clear on who you are, the audience that you serve, and then you can be very clear about how you position yourself in the market. Let's say you're in a large metropolis and you have multiple musical organizations that are competing for attention. New York City, where I live, is definitely one of those places. If you, again, are very open and broad about what you are and who you serve, then it's going to be very difficult to position yourself in a way that is attractive to people. It will just sort of blend into the noise. However, if you go down ultra specific routes, let's say we are, classical guitar is relatively specific. It could be more specific. Let's say it's even further. Let's say we're 19th century guitar aficionados, and we only feature period instruments with period players and historically informed performances and seminars and whatever. That's gonna, yes, it's gonna exclude a lot of people because they say, well, it's not for me. But for the people that it does resonate with, it's going to be very powerful and very clear choice of whether to attend or establish a relationship or not. And obviously you want to tweak that audience size to make it viable to continue. And I think classical guitar in general it's narrow enough to be specific, but still a viable audience size. So that's this idea of positioning. Again, some of these topics I'm just really skimming over to just give you an idea of things that I think are important in terms of audience and community. Now, this is what I'd like to get to, which is kind of the meat and potatoes, if you will, of this topic. And I'm just looking at my timing. So I have 10 minutes to get through this. All right. So I like to think of relationship building in terms of a funnel. And this is, once again, a very familiar online concept of this funnel idea. It can seem impersonal and mechanical because you can automate these funnels. However, I like to view it through a lens of pure relationship building. And that's what I prefaced all of this with. It's just about relationships, but now we have different tools. So at the top of the funnel, we have the general population of the world, which is a giant pool of people. And so these people do not know who you are or what you do. And so the first step in this funnel process, and to further define the funnel, we start with a large group of people, and then we eventually refine it down to the people who will be sitting and attending at one of our events, and then potentially becoming an advocate, right? So that becomes a very small group of people. That's that 1,000 people that we talked about. So we start off with this very big undefined mass of people, and the clarity there is of what we want to achieve is awareness that we exist as a society and intent. And so the intent comes from basically finding the right fit. Maybe that's a better word. I should have written good fit. So awareness that you exist as an organization and finding the people that are the right fit. So how can we do that? Well, one is having a clarity of your own mission and who you are, your identity, who you serve, a clarity of who your audience is. So we've already been talking about this. Those are ways that when your message does get received, that the right fit becomes obvious for the recipient of that message, right? It's clear that they're going to be a right fit. It's not going to happen unless you're clear about who you are and who you serve. In terms of getting that message out there, so the best tool, just like I said, relationships always have been the best and will be the best. This similarly is the equivalent, and that's word of mouth. So this will come full circle when we talk about advocacy. But the people who know, like, and trust you already and want to help and support you, those people are going to be your most powerful source of getting awareness of your organization. That's through word of mouth. And that's why it's going to be so important to support those people to create this virtuous cycle of advocacy, filling that from the top of the funnel with awareness intent. So word of mouth obviously can come from conversations, internet relationships that those people have, any of their network that branches out. More tools that are a bit more appropriate to our modern age. Okay, we've got advertising. So, you're going to have two different types of advertising as big, broad buckets. You've got branding and you've got direct marketing. Now, branding is basically everything you do and how you do it. It's going to be your logo, it's going to be your font, it's going to be your colors, it's going to be the way you talk, it's going to be what you do. It's very hard to measure branding. Branding is the Coca-Cola sign on the side of a football match. It's the ad on TV for some fragrance that's very odd and non-specific. It's just abstract. But that's branding. That's sort of the presence and that this thing exists. It's very hard to say, yes, that ad brought in an audience member. So branding is something that's intrinsic about how you operate, and it's also something that you can put out into the world. So advertising is part of that. You're going to put out Facebook ads or ads in brochures, and it's also going to be your advocates and how they interact with the world, what they say. A little more specific, but still branding is content marketing, and that could be a number of things. It could be YouTube videos, Facebook videos, things showing what you do and who you are. If you're having guest artists, they could be reaching out to their audience, essentially being an advocate, saying, I'm going to be performing in this place, and I'm really looking forward to it. And like maybe telling the time of the event, but more importantly, saying that your organization does this and they're involved and they're an advocate of it. You can measure branding through certain metrics, like how many people accessed your website, or social media metrics of how many followers you have or likes and this and that. They're not very useful. They give you a general idea of like, oh, things increasing, we get more traffic on the website or what have you, but it's very hard to measure the direct impact that they have. But creating content there, like, so for instance, for CGC, Classical Guitar Corner, we have a podcast, we have an email, we have a number of books published, we have videos on YouTube, we have articles and lessons written on the website, we have live events, we have performances, we have workshops, we have a big group of people that are involved, and an even bigger group of people who are sort of involved on a lighter sense, like on public live streams and things like that. All of those tell the world we exist, and this is who we are and how we do our thing. If you make a good fit, then please be a part of our community. And that is the crucial aspect of this. Oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. And that is the crucial part, because you want to have a call to action. And that means that you have the attention of these people even for a fleeting moment. And if they resonate with you, you need to understand that unless you establish some kind of relationship, and I'll say the most basic one is being on an email list, there's no way to follow through with that connection and build that relationship. This is the very beginning. It's the awareness and finding out the right fit. But you need to have an established connection. That could be a phone number. It could be a physical address for email, post mail, snail mail, email address. So you need to take them from point A to point B, which is awareness, to the next level, which is nurture and educate. Okay, so this is often the weakest point in anyone's chain of relationship development. And this is where, yes, someone says, I recognize you and I'm interested and I'm a good fit. Now, what happens then? Then it's not the connection to, oh, now buy a ticket or now become a member. No. Now is the time to actually develop the relationship, to further understand what it is and how you do it, all about your story. So things that could be tools there include, again, advertising, but this is going to start looking into something called retargeting. You might have to look that up, but basically it's being able to advertise to people that have already shown an interest. Your next big ticket item, or probably the biggest, is your email list. That is a wonderful way to develop a relationship, although you have to be very cognizant of not abusing people's trust. They're giving you trust and they're giving you attention when they sign up to your email list, and you do not want to abuse it. This is where you can start measuring things with both paid advertising, retargeting, and email lists. You can measure things like opening the email, how many subscribers, and then click-through rates and how many people attend. So you start to get metrics, and you can be a bit more organized with how you use those tools and how effective they are. The other tools that you have at your disposal are the telephone. I think something very much neglected is the conversations on the telephone. I have some great stories about that, but I can't share them right now because of time. Running events is an opportunity to nurture and educate a relationship, or have a relationship with further understanding. And of course, continued branding. It's just how you conduct yourself through all of those. The third step is going to be, it sounds very marketing here, but convert and close. This is where you actually get someone to take action and attend a concert, attend an event, be a donor, be a member. This is at a point where they have a relationship with you, existing relationship. This could have been for several years, mind you, not just a few weeks. This is where you have a call to action to say, now I'd like you to do something very specific. And it usually will involve money and or some other kind of valuable thing like time. We can look into ways that why people buy. We've got scarcity, we've got status, we've got the joy that it brings, there's personal connection, there's a cultural fit. All of these things are aspects that will have someone say yes. They give you the yes, and they take the leap. So in terms of scarcity, for instance, one idea that I proposed to the New York Classical Guitar Society, not a revolutionary idea, but one that we just didn't have in place, was the idea of season tickets, or the idea of using some loss leader concerts where an artist might be very expensive but very popular, where we could actually sell out concerts. And with season tickets, we can pre-sell out concerts, so that people don't always assume, which I think does happen in New York City sometimes, that they're never sold out. I can buy a ticket on the day and I'll figure it out that afternoon. That means there's no commitment, there's no follow through. Maybe they'll think about it on the day and go, yeah, I'll go, I'll turn up. But scarcity in that sense is saying, no, this is something special, and you need to actually book ahead if you want to attend. There's plenty of examples. I think I'm drawing a little bit of a blank. There's a gentleman down in Michael McManus, there he is, in Melbourne, has done a fantastic job of this in the Melbourne classical guitar scene. And I think this is from an outside point of view, I could be wrong on the details, but small venues with a small capacity, selling them out, and then having multiple concerts. It's a wonder. Scarcity can be used very poorly in marketing as well. It can be fear-driven, but I think scarcity in terms of recognizing how special something is a wonderful way to use scarcity. Status, whether we like it or not, it's a driving force. Meeting people after the concert, having recognition, names on programs, names sponsoring a concert, all these sorts of things. That's status-based, and your relationship and understanding with a person will guide whether that's appropriate or not. Cultural fit, again, kind of goes back to positioning and branding. Like, does it really fit for that person? Does it make sense? Bringing joy. I mean, this is usually what we default to, is this is an excellent thing and it will be a wonderful experience for you, but we can think about other ways to enhance joy as well. And of course, personal connection. I mean, if a concert happened and then you received a call the next day from the people running the concert and saying, hey, we missed you last night. What's going on? Did you want to come to the next concert? Can you imagine that? That's a very powerful thing compared to the very broad and bland kind of marketing most people use. It's a phone call saying, we missed you. We wanted you there. What's going on? That is a powerful way to get people really involved with an existing relationship in place. And finally, we have retention and advocacy. Also, I think it's, you can think of this as support and growth. With people who have gone through this whole process and attended your things and been part of it, you want to be able to, one, enable them to spread the word of mouth. So that's not always obvious for people who really are passionate about what you do. You need to make it easy for them to do that. And then you also want to continue to develop those relationships so these people can stay around and let the organization thrive. I think most people are focused on the very first step, awareness and intent. Just shout out to the world as loud as we can what we do. But if you think about all the effort it takes to get you all the way down there in the funnel to the point where people love what you do, they want to tell the rest of the world about what it is, those people is where you should really take care of the most and invest the most in terms of your time and energy in relationship building, because they've not only put their hand up and said, I'm a good fit and I'm interested, they've also followed through with action. So that will then allow them to become advocates for your community and filter through that virtuous cycle of awareness and intent right at the beginning of the funnel. So as you could see, there's a lot of facets here. You could talk about a lot of different tools and resources and online things, but this is, I think, a really powerful approach to audience and community development. It's centered around relationships, and it gives you a framework with which to decide on what things work and what things don't. Hopefully this has been of use, and thank you once again for letting me have the time to talk.
Good evening and welcome to the live Q&A for the Guitar Society's track. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here for this. Thanks for the great talks that you all just heard. And thank you all for joining us for this. If you are watching this on the live stream, either Facebook or YouTube, and you'd like to participate in this Q&A session on Zoom, just follow the link in the chat or go to the GFA website and register, and you'll get a link that will take you then to this Zoom session, and you can enter your questions into the Q&A panel on Zoom, and we'll try to get through as many of the questions as we can. We have a lot of panelists, a lot of great ideas, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, so we'll get through what we can. And I'll also mention that after this, for anybody that's interested, we have sort of a Guitar Society happy hour that'll start at, I guess, about 6:15 Pacific time, 9:15 Eastern time. And we'll have a chance there for a bit more interaction with one another, and also some more discussion around topics that I think are quite relevant to guitar societies right now in this current environment that we're facing. So let me just kick it off with a question. We heard a lot about sort of mission and defining communities and defining audience. And I guess I'd just like to kind of ask, maybe in a little bit more practical terms, how you suggest societies do that. And let me just start with Matt. A lot of societies may be wanting to take the step of redefining their mission or taking the next step toward more of the sort of serving of the community that you talk about, but it's a rather daunting prospect. How do you go from where you are to maybe where that vision is? What are some kind of, what's the practical advice for getting moving on that process?
There's two Matts. I'm thinking, I'm feeling your gaze on me, John, so I'm going to jump in since that's certainly was the thing that I was talking about. I mean, in my talk, I really brought up one of my favorite exercises, which is to flip the model on its head from what can we do to who can we do it for. And I really think that we have a big invitation right now, and really at all times, to think deeply about who we want to serve in our communities. Obviously, we want to serve everybody in our communities, and so, but that's, from a programming standpoint, we need to be more specific than that. And so, getting our board and our staff together in a space, getting our influential stakeholders together in a space to say what's most important to us right now, what can we feasibly do, how can we make a positive difference in our community. You know, really kind of coming together around those key questions, but I do love to focus on who, and then take that step toward what is it that we're really trying to accomplish. Because I think that I've coached many guitar organizations over the years. I think a lot of us kind of starting out in the guitar presentation world sort of think just doing guitar is good. That's enough. That's good enough. We just want to promote the instrument. We want to have as many people as possible hear it, and we just want to do guitar. And I think the reason I showed the evolution of our mission statement over time was that the mission, I think what we're learning is that we can go deeper than that. If it wasn't guitar, if it was some other art form, if it was theater, if it was, how is it that we want to engage our community, welcome our community, lift people up, bring people together? These are core principles that transcend the art form and go into humanitarian good. And I think the closer that we can get to that, the closer we can come up with something inspiring that every one of us can buy into. So I hope that's practical enough for you, John. I think it's really a series of discussions. And then at some point, from a practical standpoint, I would recommend when the wordsmithing begins, after you take notes from what everybody says, when the wordsmithing begins, you bring that down to a handful of people, because it's hard to write in a committee. And so do your wordsmithing based on what you've gathered and the synthesis that you do, and then take those ideas back out to the larger group or to the board or to the staff, and welcome input on that written product.
That's great, thanks. So then, related to that, I was curious in your talk, Matt, Rohde, and Adam, how much has your mission kind of evolved from when you first had the inkling that you wanted to do something like this to where you are now with programs in 3 different locations and building something in Mexico physically to house this? Has your mission evolved, or is this kind of what you saw from the beginning and now you're starting to really deliver on it?
Matt, you want to take it first?
Sure. Our work has evolved a lot. The mission itself, I think, we kept purposely relatively broad at the start, which is just, for those of you who may not have heard the talk, to enrich the lives of young people and children through the classical guitar. That's remained relatively constant. We've refined our programming in many ways. But the mission itself, not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to second what Matt's saying. The only thing I think that has changed, the number of words that we have used to describe the mission has been cut down substantially over the years. I think in year one, there were multiple paragraphs, and then it went down to a paragraph, then it went down to, again and again. It's about refining, becoming aerodynamic.
The language has become much more streamlined, that's for sure. But the basic spirit of our work has not changed.
Okay, that's great. For those of you just joining us, if you have questions, you'd like to type them into the Q&A panel. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And there's also an option there to sort of vote on questions, so we can try to prioritize the ones that have maybe more people interested in asking the same thing. So let me go to a question that is coming from Chuck Houlihan, which is, I think, related to what we're talking about already. And I'll just read this from Chuck. What strategies can you offer for smaller organizations that are trying to quickly adjust to the new realities of serving our communities and artists while staying true to our mission? I'll let any of you jump in that have some thoughts on that.
I take it, is it the new realities is in being forced online and not being able to come together? Is that, I assume that's, I mean,
I expect so, but I imagine it could also be sort of changes that happen, maybe be rethinking on the fly.
Yeah, I think with every challenge that presents itself, there's opportunities that come with that as well. Opportunities to be creative and think about new ways to, thinking outside of the box and ways that people might have not been so open to before. I think that the core of what I was talking about was relationship development, and I think that that's still very possible these days. It can even be even more personal. It's something like this can shake us up and shake us out of our normal rhythms. And I still very much believe, whenever I usually end up being on the phone with people I have problems with, actually. And I find it's a wonderful way to resolve problems. And it's also the strongest relationship builder. And some of those relationships have turned out to be amazing. Starting from a negative place, they've come around to a positive place. So I think one of the needs that's even more pronounced now is the need for connection, personal connection and communication. So making an effort to go out and be there and check in on people, even if they didn't ask, can be a really positive aspect to consolidating the core of your community. And for most societies, I think that's part of their mission is to be there in a supportive role.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying, Simon, and I love that you're talking about relationships. I think that, again, going back to this sense of what are we at our core, almost beneath the music. When we put on a beautiful concert online, or back when we were able to do it in person, it's a beautiful night. What is the impact of that? What is the result of that? How do people feel? And that is something we could spend the rest of the night trying to define, but let's sum it up and say, just for the sake of argument, that it's good, that it's warm, it's contact, it's inspiration. And so these are things that exist in many, many different ways. And I know so Chuck asked specifically about small organizations, so organizations that maybe don't have tons of resources and are wanting sort of practical ways. And I think, Simon, your idea of picking up the phone and calling people, there's not a ringing string involved in that, but there is a person-to-person connection. We have experienced that. I called 3 of our donors this morning for different reasons, had wonderful conversations, and we reminisced about some of the experiences we've had together, talked through some of the things that they're going through right now. And that's something we can also activate our boards to do and our staff to do. Of course, we're also talking about transitioning things online. And so I think small organizations can do that. Fortunately, the technology is available, and there's a lot of online tutorials for how to do a pretty good streaming concert or video something in advance and put it online. So if that's something that a small organization does, I will actually throw out that we created a series of online events in April and May, almost 30 hours of programming during those 2 months. And we had a tremendous amount of enthusiasm from our audience. And we did it in a very specific way, though I think is sort of a tip almost worth sharing. And that is that rather than put all of our content online in YouTube or Facebook in an open format and sort of ask people to come en masse to it, we created an RSVP process and created events that at their core were about togetherness. And so we really thought about how we hosted them, what our messages were, and what the art was that was being presented, and offered this kind of a Q&A back and forth. So it really felt like people were coming to a one-time event that was a moment of togetherness in time. And our audience really came to depend on it. In fact, the woman I talked to this morning said, "Thank you so much for all those Tuesday night concerts these last couple of months." The interesting thing from an organizational standpoint is that in the RSVP process, we had an option to donate. And so people didn't have to. These were free events, but they could choose to if they wanted to. And our newsletter subscription rate rose faster than at any other time in our history. Our donations in April were 4 times what they were in 2019. And the kind of feedback that we got was really, truly extraordinary. And I think it really had to do with the idea of rather than putting guitar playing out there in large quantities, along with all of the other guitar playing that's going on in the stratosphere, it was about bringing our community together in meaningful ways, and people really responded to that. So that might be something for organizers to think about, and it's really possible to do it on a small scale. I should say 15% of our RSVPs chose to donate, 85% didn't, and that's great.
I also, can I just add just a little something? I've found that during this period of time, the threshold for excitement is a lot lower. So I think when we've spoken to families, they get excited about guitar education even more. This is an opportunity to tap into music with youth that is unprecedented, because everybody is just aching for, like Matt said, connection, for making music, doing any activity. And so even the smallest thing, I was talking to a family today, and I have never seen smiles so big before. I mean, just, guitar teacher to student and their parent, and they were so excited. So I think this is an ideal opportunity to not only engage, but to push more. And I think if you get the students excited and their families excited, that will also translate to getting patrons excited.
Okay, great. Let's move to another question coming in. This one is from Alvaro Henrique in Brazil. And he is wondering, well, he makes the point that he thinks a lot of the focus in what we've been discussing has been on educating kids, educating amateurs to play the classical guitar. Whereas his society, they consider their main challenge to be having a classical guitar audience of people who don't actually intend to play the instrument. And so his question is, I believe our education work fuels ticket sales and concert attendance, but what would you suggest for us to achieve this goal of getting more audience members just for the music's sake? Anybody want to tackle that?
I'm happy to jump in, and Erik, I'm sure you've got some thoughts as well. I've of course been thinking about this all these years, and I think the conclusion I've come to is that we have to be at peace and embrace the notion that people interact with things in different ways for different reasons. And those things change over the course of people's lives. So I'm a super avid tennis player. I play 3 times a week, love the game. I haven't been playing lately. I'm not a tennis watcher, don't have a TV. And that's not how I do tennis. You'd think I would be a USTA member, and you'd think I would watch Wimbledon every year, and I don't. It's not that I don't like it. It's not what I do. It's not how I do tennis. So when I think of audiences, I think if we come at our communities guitar first, then we require them to be guitar aficionados or guitar fans. And I would say that we're so much more than that. Back to Simon's ideas about relationship, we are humans. And we're humans that celebrate a beautiful art form. We happen to know a lot about it. And so we curate things and put things on stage. But there's a lot of ways that we are in the community. And so you know, if it's a program whereby we partner with another charity organization and allow their patrons to buy tickets and have all of the money go to benefit that charity, if it's a benefit element that we do, if it's a partnership across multimedia where we have art and guitar presented in the same way, if there's some sort of additional elements or collaborative elements, or if we look at every single individual concert from a cultural standpoint, from a artistic standpoint, what are the ways in which people can connect into this experience on their own terms, even if guitar is not the way they define themselves. And let's face it, that's almost everybody on the planet. You know, we're here at the GFA, so we're all connected to the guitar in a deep way, but we have a huge job to do. And that is to lift our communities in meaningful ways. And so the more we can look at our art form in a really fundamental level and talk about it, invite people, engage people in a deep way, engage community organizations in a deep way. Those are the ways that I believe we have built our audience over time.
One way I think, sort of furthering on the point that I talked about earlier in the video, which I get sort of raised eyebrows and pushback against, is this idea of narrowing down and clarifying what you're presenting. So if you are not presenting to guitarists and that's not your audience, there might be some other things that unify that audience, that they have share in common and might resonate with them. I think it can be very counterintuitive and daunting to do things that seem to exclude people because it becomes so specific. But in doing that, your message becomes more powerful. So maybe there's some workshopping you could do about the audience that maybe has already presented themselves, that you are familiar with. What are some of their drivers? What are some of their interests and passions? And why did they come to the performances that you've already put on? And maybe you can sort of focus that to be attractive to more people like them.
Go ahead, Erik.
Oh yeah, so I was going to agree thanks, Matt, with what everybody said. You know, I think you know, there's a lot that has to do with people's ages and their time in life. You know, so there's a lot of kids who love to play guitar, and sitting through a concert is not their idea of a good time. And I think that's a misconception. And one of our staff members recently pointed out that there's been this concern that classical music audiences are getting older and they're going to die. And we keep getting concerned about that. And then the audiences are still there. Actually, I mean, it's changed some, but one of the things is when people get older, their kids grow up, they have time to, you know, really enjoy this sort of thing in a way that they didn't before. I mean, right now I've got, you know, my wife and I have a young kid, and we don't go out on dates to concerts that much. It's not what we're doing in this stage of our life, but, you know, at some point, you know, we'll be doing that again. And we did before he was born. So there's a lot of different reasons why people engage, you know, in different ways.
Yeah, it's such a big question. And so it's, you know, kind of different thoughts are occurring, but two more little ideas. One, I think that we think about our audience way too late most of the time. A lot of times we think about our audience when it's time to market to our audience. And our audiences are born of deep relationships over long periods of time. You know, our sort of core audience in Austin that comes to our standard concert events have not heard of any of the artists that we're producing by and large. They trust us though. They know us because we've been around for a long time and we've built relationships in an intentional way. I also think that we need to really think, I'm going to use the word reinvent, the way we think about concert presentation overall and what is a concert experience. I think that we have for far too long felt like a concert hall and a concert stage is the top of a hierarchy of what it is that we do. And, presenting a concert to one person in a hospice or hospital is every bit as important. Going to a school and performing in that school for that particular community is every bit as important. Building special programming at the public library where you have a musical story time where the music isn't the main thing, it's the thing in the background while the kids are listening to the story. Every bit is important. We really need to think deeply about, I'm sorry, I sound like a broken record, but it's back to that flipping of the model. It's not what we want to do. It's who do we want to do it for? Build everything from that. If you want to reach more people, then start with who. Develop a relationship with them and let that change, let that alter how you teach, what you teach, where you play, where you market, where you invite people in.
Okay, we have a couple of questions that are more on the sort of nonprofit management and administration side. I'll sort of combine these. These are from Jim McCutcheon and from Kathy Acosta Zavala. I guess the question is, first of all, for those that are heading nonprofit organizations, what percentage of your professional work time do you spend on the mission? And are you compensated through the organization is your work a donation to the community? And then related to that, from another question, what percentage of your organization's annual budget is routed to administrative salaries? I think this is going to look absolutely different for every organization and at every stage that they're in, but maybe if you could just have a little bit of insight into sort of what percentage of your time you spend on the mission itself and sort of how compensation works within your organization.
I might take a shot at this. I think we spend most of our time trying to honor the mission. I think if we lose focus of the mission, then we get sidetracked and we dilute the organization. I think everything pays homage constantly to the mission and refining that and building out from that. In terms of compensation or how much, I think about it's a 80-20, 80% goes to programming, 20% goes to admin. So I think that's a pretty common balance that's not, I think, particular to Cathar Project, but many nonprofits have that 20 to 30%, 70-80 balance for admin and programming.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Adam. I think that in the 20% range, maybe slightly under that for our organization at the moment, as far as what's specifically administrative salary. My first 7 years were volunteer running the organization that I run, in 2003 had the first staff person hired, and then I came on half-time. And so as we've grown, I think we're a staff of 14 now. I've actually stayed half-time personally, but everyone in my organization is paid a salary and benefits and retirement and all of that sort of thing. So these are all full-time jobs, except for mine, and then of course all the many contractors. But I think that's been arranged, right? It started with all volunteer and lots of time and no money, and grew over the years. So there's a big range there depending on the life cycle of an organization.
It can be a delicate subject too, bringing up money and nonprofit. I think, people working in a nonprofit world are entitled to make a living, make money. And I don't think it is incorrect for an organization to begin to think how to compensate their employees or contractors well. everybody needs to feed themselves, and I think that also encourages good practices in the field. I know within Cathar Project, we've tried to dedicate ourselves to paying our contractors and part-time employees well, and I think that inspires other organizations to do the same.
It's a great point, Adam. There's a great TED Talk by Dan Pallotta, and that's with 2 L's and 2 T's, Pallotta. But if you look him up and look on TED Talk, it's a great way of thinking about investment and why it's critical to invest financially in the nonprofit sector, and some of the double standards that exist between the nonprofit sector and the for-profit sector, and why that makes it so hard for the nonprofit sector to meet the giant crushing needs that are left to the nonprofit sector to meet in our society.
Great. We have a few more minutes left, so we'll move to another question. This one from Bill Ash. He wonders how you feel that GFA can be more helpful to guitar societies. It's a great question.
My first answer is GFA should do everything that Bill's been telling them they should do. Bill's got amazing ideas. So ways that they can, giving grants to guitar societies, finding ways of fundraising. This is Bill's idea. There's actually a lot that small guitar societies could really benefit from relatively small infusions of cash. And it would be amazing to have also people like Cathar Project and Austin Classical Guitar, being out there, helping to build education programs, in many more areas of the country, as consultants, and GFA could help with that. And I think offering a vision, and I don't want to give too much away, but I think GFA is really starting to take a lot more leadership in vision and equity as well. So some of this stuff is already happening.
One hypothetical that I remember started when I was on the board in Sydney. In Australia, when people come to play concerts, it's very difficult to make the flight and the concert fees balance out. So you really have to line up a number of concerts. And so there's been a couple of attempts there to coordinate with administration to get those things going. And John, I remember you and I remember this idea had been floated or discussed, and I'm sure it's been discussed previously as well. But the idea that it potentially could lend an administration influence or hand or guidance for a number of different organizations, because I think there's some big challenges regarding visas and itineraries and coordination, and that can be organized by the societies themselves. But I wonder if the GFA might be in a good position to potentially be some kind of contributor or coordinator in that role.
Yeah.
Okay, let me move to one more question here. This is from Michael Jones. He says, Cathara's work inspired this question because they are in multiple communities, but this would look differently with each of your societies. What is your process for connecting to the different locations' communities? And I wonder if maybe we could start with Adam and Matt on that, because you are operating in 3 very different communities. And do you have a different process there for connecting with those students, those communities, those audiences, or are you able to do this sort of the same thing everywhere? I can't imagine you're doing the same approach in each of those communities.
Well, each community has its own identity, and we try to identify that identity and articulate that connection through the teachers in that community. So they are really the liaison to the families, and by communication, we can better understand how to serve them. And also just simple things like parent-teacher conferences, opening up the lines of conversations. Parents can really offer the families offer key information to understanding the fabric of the community. They are one piece of the larger pie. So I think it changes for each community. What would you say, Matt?
Well, as far as connecting the communities themselves, I think as I think we mentioned in our talk, as unwieldy as it can be at times administratively, it's also an amazing opportunity for us. And I think part of the fundamental character of Cathara Project, we, small things make a big difference. The kids have exchanged pen pal letters. There have been video conferences that they've participated in across countries. And we've got an international international children's guitar orchestra in the works, which still may be a year or two off, but it's a really great thing to work towards and to get people thinking about. So yeah,
That's great. That's great. Thanks. So maybe just one last question or just, well, comment and question. Erik, thank you for that fantastic video that was shared at the beginning of this block, Beyond Ferguson. Amazing piece and amazing performance and video. And I wonder if we don't have a lot of time here, but maybe just say a few words about sort of how that came about and what the impact of that you think has been on those students who played that.
Yeah, well, all that credit goes to our director of education, Brian Gaudino. So he discovered the piece through Soundboard magazine when Duo Noir appeared on the cover in 2015, and the piece was published in there, and kind of had it in the back of his mind, I think, and then proposed the idea to a quartet of our students in the 2018 and 19 school year, and we had a quartet play it then, and they wasn't sure how they would react to the theme of it, but it was something that was very meaningful for them, and they really kind of jumped on it. And a couple of those students graduated. We had a half new quartet that played it again and really took to it, and the group that you saw was there were actually 5 guitarists in there. We had a couple alum that came back in it and took to that. And that video was created for a social justice festival that happens in Cleveland. That's online this year, of course. And we kind of threw it at the GFA. But the kids were involved in writing. They wrote some of the poetry. They took some of the pictures. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. And the article in Soundboard says something about it, but it begins with a heartbeat. And then actually uses a melody that Michael Brown composed.
Well, it was a very powerful video, and thanks for sharing it. Thanks for sharing it with the GFA. It was really great to be able to start this session today with that.
I mean, I love it so much, Erik. That piece is so powerful, and it just strikes me as I look around this call that we're all on, that we've got work to do. We need to work on leadership, and we need to work on who's building and running these organizations, and that's certainly something that I would love to be part of a concerted effort on part of any nonprofit organizations and any individuals that see themselves in leadership, if that's through internships or mentorship, connection. I really hope that in a very short period of time that the makeup of the leadership of our guitar organizations starts to diversify, and so that's something that I'm sure we all share as a value here on the call, but certainly something that I would hope for, because the work, and I hope that the work that's been described in the lectures and in the videos that we saw tonight is just the beginning of how our organizations reach deep into the community. But that extends all the way up to the leadership of the organizations themselves. And I think that we can envision change and growth here in the next near little while.
It's a great point, Matt. Great challenge, I think, for all of us. Unfortunately, I think we have to wrap it up at this point. We can certainly talk about that and many other topics for a much longer period, but we will have a chance to connect for anybody who wants to join us in about 12 minutes in the Guitar Society's happy hour. So take a little bit of a break. We'll come back at 6:15 Pacific time. Thank you so much, Matt, Adam, Matt, Simon, and Erik, not only for your talks, but also for making the time and being so open in your answers here in the Q&A. It's really great to learn from all of you. And thanks for everybody who asked questions and participated in this online. Hope to see many of you in the happy hour coming right up. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching, and thank you to everyone who participated in our Guitar Society Track Day. This is going to conclude Block 2. We still, of course, have Block 3 coming at you in just a few minutes, and that will be, of course, our preliminary round ICAC, the International Concert Artist Competition. Those will be the final competitors in the preliminary round. Coming up tomorrow, we have our final day of the convention, of our virtual convention, wraps up tomorrow, and we've got a lot of great events for you. We have a technique workshop with Goran Krvokapic. We have our IYC finals, and that is the International Youth Competition, and we have both juniors and seniors in videos that they filmed this week. And so we have the final rounds of both of those. We also will be announcing who is going to be in the ICAC semifinals. And we have the Beijing duo in concert. We like to end every stream with a performance of Lagrima by a mystery performer. And tonight, our mystery performer is Gabriele Bianco.